International, our voice in the world.
This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
The Minister of National Defense and Chief of Staff of the People's National Army, General Saeed Shingriha, has extended his sincere condolences following the death of the crew members of the military transport plane that crashed shortly after takeoff at the Bufarik Air Base in the 1st Military Region. As tension has been running high in the Middle East, the Israeli army said it has launched new airstrikes on Iranian cities, including Isfahan and the capital Tehran. And in Lebanon, at least 6 people, including 4 children, were today killed in airstrikes launched by the Israeli army against the eastern part of the country. Those were the headlines, and now the news in detail from Radio Algeria International. Good afternoon. First in our news, 2 more crew members from the BE 1900 military transport plane that crashed shortly after takeoff at the Bufarik Air Base in the 1st Military Region last Thursday have died from their injuries, bringing the total number of casualties to 4, according to a statement issued today by the Ministry of National Defense. The same source indicated that in the face of this great tragedy, the Minister Delegate to the Minister of National Defense and Chief of Staff of the People's National Army, General Saeed Shingriha, reiterated on his behalf and on behalf of all officers and personnel of the People's National Army his deepest condolences and most sincere sympathies to the families of the martyrs, praying to Almighty Allah to bestow them with His mercy, to admit them to His vast paradise, and to grant their families and loved ones patience and forbearance. Earlier, General Saeed Shingriha paid a visit to the Central Army Hospital in Ain al-Najah in the suburbs of Algiers, where he checked on the injured of the crash, closely examined their health condition, and offered them and their families moral support, wishing them a speedy recovery. The Secretary General of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Lounes Megraman, has co-chaired the 3rd session of the Algerian-Turkish political consultation held in Istanbul with the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Turkey, Mr. Musa Kalaklikaya. Marin Bershi has more details in this report.
On the occasion, the 2 parties praised the historical ties and the exceptional level reached by the Algerian-Turkish relations in recent years, while hailing the important steps taken in strengthening the partnership between the 2 countries in various fields, particularly economic and trade. During the consultations, the 2 sides discussed the agenda of upcoming bilateral events in order to strengthen cooperation and partnership relations in accordance with the vision and will of the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, and his brother, the President of the Republic of Turkey, Mr. Recep Tayyip Erdogan. The 2 sides also exchanged views and analysis on several regional and international issues of common concern, in particular the developments taking place in the Middle East and the occupied Palestinian territories, as well as the issue of Western Sahara and the Sahel region.
The Algerian airliner Air Algérie Group has announced that flights to and from Doha, Beirut, Oman and Dubai will remain suspended until further notice. The decision has been taken in order to guarantee the high standards of safety and security for Air Algérie customers and crew following developments in the region. For further information, the airline invites its customers to contact their sales offices or call the center on 3302 for calls from Algeria or on the international number from foreign countries. Air Algérie assures its customers that it will keep them informed of any new arrangements or updates concerning its flight schedule to the Middle East. As tension has been running high in the Middle East, the Israeli army said it had launched new airstrikes on Iranian cities, including Isfahan and the capital Tehran. It announced today having launched a major wave of attacks against Iranian infrastructure 1 week after a U.S.-Israeli operation was launched on Iran. According to Iranian television, explosions were heard today in various districts of Tehran. In this connection, the Iranian armed forces were quoted by the news agency IRNA as saying that the Iranian Navy had targeted U.S. bases, notably in the United Arab Emirates and Kuwait. This came as Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian rejected U.S. President Trump's call for an unconditional surrender in response to the American president's capitulation offer to end the war. The Iranian president, who apologized to his country's neighbors for the air raids targeting their territories since the beginning of the war, and pledged to no longer attack the Gulf states unless strikes were fired from the neighboring countries. Earlier, explosions were also heard in Dubai, Manama, or at a time when Saudi Arabia announced having destroyed a ballistic missile aiming an airbase. Meanwhile, the Arab League Secretary General Hussam Zeki announced the holding tomorrow, Sunday, of an emergency meeting of the organization to discuss the latest developments in the Middle East. And in Lebanon, at least 6 people, including 4 children and their parents, were today killed in airstrikes launched by the Israeli army against the eastern part of the country. The news agency ANI said the Israeli raid targeted today at dawn a locality in the district of Baalbek. This came as the health ministry put at 41 the number of people killed in the Israeli operation launched overnight against the country's eastern part. 40 other people were wounded in the attacks. Meanwhile, the U.S. Secretary General Antonio Guterres condemned the attack perpetrated yesterday against a position of the UN Interim Force in Lebanon, UNIFIL, in Lebanon's southwestern part, during which 3 Ghanaian blue helmets were wounded. Shifting to Africa now, the South Sudanese army has ordered forces from the United Nations mission in South Sudan, UNMISS, and NGOs operating in an opposition-held area to withdraw immediately ahead of military offensives. Mariam Bersha has more details.
The increasingly unstable country is experiencing renewed fighting between government and opposition forces, mainly in Jonglei State Center East. At least 280,000 people have been displaced there since December, according to the UN. The town of Akobo in eastern Jonglei, held by opposition forces, is home to an UNMISS peacekeeping force of about 100 people. It also has a hospital supported by NGOs, including the International Committee of the Red Cross, ICRC, where the wounded are flooding in. In a brief statement, South Sudanese Army spokesman Lulu Rangkwang said the town and surrounding areas were the next targets of military offensives. As a result, he said the army orders the immediate closure and withdrawal of UNMISS forces from their temporary operational base in the town of Akobo within 72 hours. He announced that UN agencies, NGOs and their staff are required to leave within the same time frame, requiring civilians to leave for areas under army control or areas they consider safer. These orders are intended to avoid unnecessary collateral damage.
And at least 15 members of the Benin armed forces were killed and 4 others injured in an attack carried out by armed men in Kofunu. In a statement to the press, Army spokesperson James Johnson confirmed the provisional toll from the assault that occurred on Wednesday, noting that the 4 wounded soldiers received medical treatment and their lives are no longer in danger. He added that after the attack, a column of armed men attempted to withdraw from the combat zone. They were spotted and targeted by military aircraft, which neutralized 4 fighters. The spokesperson also said that military operations are ongoing to prevent the attackers from fleeing and to secure the area following the assault. More than 200 people have died in a landslide at an artisanal mining site in Rubaya in the Taisi territory, the Congolese Ministry of Mines announced in an official statement. According to provisional toll, over 200 people, including 70 children, were killed, while several injured victims were evacuated to medical facilities in Goma for treatment. The tragedy occurred on Tuesday after exceptionally heavy rains triggered a massive landslide, burying several mining tunnels in the area. The Congolese government strongly denounced the precarious mining conditions in areas beyond state control, stressing that the absence of regulatory and supervisory services exposes artisanal miners to serious serious risks. Authorities said rescue operations are being monitored by the ministry's local division in Beni in coordination with humanitarian partners while calling for stronger protection of children. Meanwhile, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has appointed former U.S. diplomat James Swan as the new head of the United Nations Organization Stabilization Mission in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, succeeding Bintou Keita. Swan previously served as U.S. ambassador to the Democratic Republic of the Congo from 2013 to 2016. The UN mission's main role is to protect civilians and help stabilize Eastern DRC, where government forces have been fighting armed groups for decades. And the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, has said that 56 Afghan civilians, including 24 children, have been killed since border clashes between Afghan forces and the Pakistani army intensified last week. Mariam Bashir reports again.
In a statement, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, added that since the beginning of the year, 69 Afghan civilians have been killed and 141 others injured. He urged both the Pakistani army and the Afghan security forces to immediately end the fighting and prioritize humanitarian assistance for the millions of people who depend on aid. After months of tensions, the two neighboring countries have been engaged in armed conflicts since February 26, when Afghanistan launched a border offensive in response to Pakistani airstrikes. Pakistan has accused the Taliban authorities of harboring militants responsible for attacks on its territory, an allegation the Afghan authorities deny. Turk also stressed that civilians on both sides of the border are being forced to flee airstrikes, artillery fire, mortars and gunfire, calling on all parties to take effective measures to protect civilians and to conduct swift, thorough and independent investigations into alleged violations of international law, ensuring accountability for those responsible.
And finally, Algerian gymnast Kayla Nemour has qualified for the uneven bars final at the second stage of the Women's Artistic Gymnastics World Cup currently being held in Baku, Azerbaijan. The 2024 Olympic champion secured in this event a place in the final after finishing third in the qualifying round after two Russian gymnasts. Meanwhile, the other Algerian representative in the competition, Luna Hammams, did not qualify for the uneven bars final scheduled for today in Baku. With this last piece of news, we come to the end of this news bulletin. Time now for our weekly programs. We'll meet you again tomorrow. Thank you and صحفتكم.
Hello and welcome to our special program. Today we journey back more than 1,000 years to explore the life of one of history's greatest minds, a scholar whose works shaped medicine, philosophy and science for centuries. His name was Ibn Sina, known in the West as Avicenna. He lived during what historians call the Islamic Golden Age, a remarkable period of intellectual growth, discovery and cultural flourishing across the Muslim world. Today, we explore how Ibn Sina's life and work reflect the deeper values of Islam: knowledge, compassion, reason, and the pursuit of peace. Ibn Sina was born in 980 Common Era in what is known Uzbekistan, near the ancient city of Bukhara. By all accounts, he was a child prodigy. By the age of 10, he had memorized the Quran. As a teenager, he had mastered logic, mathematics, astronomy and medicine. But Ibn Sina's brilliance was not just about intelligence, it was about curiosity. Islamic teaching places great emphasis on seeking knowledge. One saying attributed to the Prophet Muhammad encourages believers to seek knowledge, even unto China, meaning that learning has no boundaries. During Ibn Sina's lifetime, the Muslim world stretched from Spain to Central Asia. Cities were thriving centers of trade and scholarship. Among them was Baghdad, home to the famous House of Wisdom, a grand library and research institution where scholars translated and expanded upon Greek, Persian, and Indian knowledge. It was in this culture of learning that Ibn Sina flourished. By the age of 18, Ibn Sina was already a practicing physician. His reputation grew quickly. He was known not only for diagnosing illnesses others could not understand, but for treating patients with gentleness and care. Medicine for Ibn Sina was not just science, it was service. His most famous work, The Canon of Medicine, became one of the most influential medical textbooks in history. For over 600 years, it was used in European universities as a primary reference in medical education. In it, Ibn Sina carefully described diseases, treatments, surgical procedures, and the importance of hygiene. He emphasized experimentation, observation, and logic, principles that remain central to modern medicine. But his contributions did not stop there. Ibn Sina also wrote extensively on philosophy, attempting to reconcile reason and faith. He believed that truth could not contradict truth, that scientific discovery and belief in God ultimately pointed toward the same reality. For him, the study of the natural world was a way of understanding divine wisdom. To understand Ibn Sina fully, we must understand the world he lived in. The Islamic Golden Age, roughly from the 8th to the 4th centuries, was marked by extraordinary achievements in mathematics, astronomy, architecture, literature, and medicine. Scholars developed algebra, defined astronomical instruments, and built hospitals that treated patients regardless of background or religion. These hospitals were funded through charitable endowments, reflecting Islam's strong emphasis on caring for the sick and vulnerable. Peace in this context was not simply the absence of war, it was the creation of a just and flourishing society, one where knowledge served humanity. Ibn Sina embodied that ideal. But his life was not without hardship. Political instability forced him to move frequently between cities. He sometimes served as a court physician, sometimes as a government advisor. At times, he was even imprisoned due to political rivalries. Yet through it, he continued writing, producing more than 200 works over his lifetime. His resilience reflected a deep inner discipline, a quality highly valued in Islamic spirituality. Striving for excellence, patience during hardship, and dedication to learning were all considered forms of worship. Ibn Sina passed away in 1037, but his influence spread far beyond his lifetime. Centuries later, European scholars encountered his writings through translation into Latin. His ideas helped shape medieval philosophy and medicine, influencing thinkers such as Thomas Aquinas and shaping the intellectual foundations of the Renaissance. So what does Ibn Sina teach us today? First, that Islam has a long tradition of intellectual inquiry. At a time when parts of Europe were emerging from the early Middle Ages, Muslim scholars were preserving ancient knowledge and making groundbreaking discoveries. Second, that faith and reason need not be enemies. For Ibn Sina, studying the human body or the movement of the stars was not separate from spirituality, it was an expression of it. And third, that peace can be built through knowledge. The Islamic greeting, Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you, reflects a worldview in which peace is something to be actively cultivated. Through medicine, education, charity, and justice, scholars like Ibn Sina sought to reduce suffering and uplift society. Their tools were books, instruments, and ideas, not weapons. Today, when conversations about Islam often focus on conflict, it is important to remember figures like Ibn Sina. He represents a different narrative, one of scholarship, compassion, and contribution to global civilization. From hospitals in medieval Europe to modern medical schools, his legacy lives on. His story reminds us that the pursuit of knowledge can unite civilizations, the curiosity transcends borders, and that, at its best, faith can inspire humanity's greatest achievements. The golden age of Islam was not golden because it was free of challenges. It was golden because of minds like Ibn Sina's, minds committed to learning, service, and the betterment of humanity. In remembering him, we remember a chapter of history where cooperation across cultures led to progress that benefited the entire world. And perhaps in our time, that is a lesson worth revisiting. Thank you for joining us for this journey into the life of Ibn Sina, physician, philosopher, and one of the brightest lights of the Islamic Golden Age. Have a nice day, and peace be upon you.
Hi and a hearty welcome. Today we'll focus on the Holy Quran and the Earth's atmosphere. Modern science has discovered facts about the atmosphere mentioned in the Holy Quran over 1400 years ago. In the relevant verse of the Holy Quran, Allah, God Almighty, swears by the sky and its functions of returning without specifying what it returns. In Islamic doctrine, a divine oath signifies the magnitude of importance of a special relation to Allah, God the Creator, and manifests His majesty, the supreme truth, in a special way. Another verse describes the divine act that made the sky a seating for the dwellers of earth. Let us see what modern atmospheric science has to say about the role and functions of the sky. The atmosphere is a word which denotes all the air surrounding the Earth, from the ground all the way up to the edge from which space starts. The atmosphere is composed of several layers, each defined because of the various phenomena which occur within the layer. Rain, for one, is returned to Earth by the clouds in the atmosphere. Explaining the hydrologic cycle, Encyclopedia Britannica writes, water evaporates from both the aquatic and terrestrial environment as it is heated by the sun's energy. The rates of evaporation and precipitation depend on solar energy, as do the patterns of circulation of moisture in the air and currents in the oceans. Evaporation exceeds precipitations over the oceans, and this water vapor is transported by the wind over land, where it returns to the land through precipitations. Not only does the atmosphere return what was on the surface back to the surface, but it reflects back into space that which might damage the flora and fauna the Earth sustains, such as excessive radiant heat. In the 1990s, collaborations between NASA, the European Space Agency, and the Institute of Space and Astronomical Science of Japan resulted in the International Solar Terrestrial Physics Science Initiative. Polar Wind and Geotel are a part of this initiative, combining resources and scientific communities to obtain coordinated, simultaneous investigations of the Sun-Earth space environment over an extended period of time. They have an excellent explanation of how the atmosphere returns solar heat to space. Besides returning rain, heat, and radio waves, the atmosphere protects us like a sheeting above our heads by filtering out deadly cosmic rays, powerful ultraviolet radiation from the sun, and even meteorites on collision course with the Earth. Encyclopedia Britannica, describing the role of stratosphere, tells us about its protective role in absorbing dangerous ultraviolet radiation. The mesosphere is a layer in which many meteors burn up while entering the Earth's atmosphere. Imagine a baseball zipping along at 30,000 miles per hour. That's how big and fast many meteors are. When they plow through the atmosphere, meteors are heated to more than 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit as they glow. A meteor compresses air in front of it. The air heats up, in turn heating the meteor. Earth is surrounded by a magnetic force field, a bubble in space called the magnetosphere, tens of thousands of miles wide. The magnetosphere acts as a shield that protects us from solar storms. However, according to new observations from NASA's IMAGE spacecraft and the joint NASA-European Space Agency cluster satellites, immense cracks sometimes develop in Earth's magnetosphere and remain open for hours. This allows the solar wind to gush through and power stormy space weather. Fortunately, these cracks do not expose Earth's surface to the solar wind. Our atmosphere protects us even when our magnetic field does not. How would it be possible for a 7th century desert dweller, that is the noble prophet Muhammad, God's peace and blessings be upon him, to describe the sky in a manner so precise that only recent scientific discoveries have confirmed it? The only way is that he duly received revelation from the creator of the earth and the skies, Allah, God Almighty.
تشاهدون برامج